All right, everyone. I think we'll get started. We'll let everyone who's staggering in just come in as needed. But I'd just like to welcome everyone to our webinar, Opportunities in Your Working Forest, presented by us here at Working Lands Trust. I'd like to thank everyone who was able to tune in tonight and take time out of their afternoon to listen in. My name is Jared Lamb. I'm a conservation associate here at Working Lands Trust, and I'll serve as the moderator for today. I'm also third in the lineup to present. And speaking of the lineup, we have what I hope will be a great and informative one for you all today. First, we have Mr. Chuck Daniels. Chuck is a procurement forester at Domtar, stationed at the Plymouth Pulp Mill, but he is also a forest landowner himself, of which he is an excellent steward of. And he's worked with us here at Working Lands Trust to place his farm in a conservation easement. And he'll be talking about his role at Domtar as well as his property conservation values and how we can support sustainable forestry. Next, we have Dr. Mark Megalos. Dr. Megalos is an emeritus extension professor at North Carolina State University, a policy consultant for the National Woodland Owners Association, and on top of that, he serves as our board chair here at Working Lands Trust, and he's going to discuss finding markets for your farms and forest. I will follow Mark and talk about how to maximize the recreational, ecological, and economic values in your working forest. And last but definitely not least, we have Mikey Fulk, who is our executive director here at Working Lands Trust, and she will present on how we can conserve our working forest for future generations. Before we get started, I would like to specifically thank all the organizations that made this webinar possible. Um, Specifically, I'd like to thank the Sustainable Forestry and Land Retention Project with the Roanoke Cooperative, as well as the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities and the U.S. Forest Service. I'd like to mention that you can ask questions in the chat as we go, and then at the end of each presentation, you can type any questions that you have at the end, and I'll ask them to the presenter. And we'll have time to answer a couple questions in between, and any questions that go unanswered, maybe the specific presenter can respond if we can't get to it in time and address it in the chat. With that being said, we can get started, and I will pass the honors on to Mr. Chuck Daniels.
All right, Jared, thank you for introducing me. I am not a professional speaker. I'm a forester by heart, and I will be talking from the heart about my farm and about why I got into the Working Land Trust program, as well as my job as a professional forester and who I work for, what we make, and how it all fits together. As I said, I'm not a very high-tech individual, and I threw together some slides here that I've been using on different presentations to kind of talk about what I just mentioned, kind of the whole scope of things. And first of all, I've been in forestry for 40 years, 41 years actually. I'm getting ready to retire in April. But it's been a good profession for me. I've worked in land management, procurement, different aspects. And in my current job with Domtar Paper Mill in Plymouth, and I've been with since 2008, I've had the liberty, thanks to my management, of doing a lot of outreach work with the Forestry Association, with Working Land Trust, with Tree Farm, other organizations to share my experience and, like I said, how it all ties together. And the center point of what I'll be talking about is how important the sustainability of this natural resource is that we have in Eastern North Carolina. Our wood basket for Plymouth is, and when I say wood basket, I mean our buying area that we procure wood from to make our product. Is about a 60-mile radius of our mill on average, depending on time of year and situation that we're in. And we are blessed to have an abundance of loblolly pine, which is what we exclusively use to make our product. It happens to have the best fiber characteristics, fiber length, thickness, etc., to make the product that we make. And this is coming into our mill. This is our logo sign. The mill's in the background. We parallel the Roanoke River in Plymouth, and we're situated right along the river. And there's a lot of water used in our pulping process, which we receive from the river, use it in our process, and then it goes through a very extensive treatment process. We have 100 acres of water treatment area, and the water actually returns back to the river cleaner than it came out. This is the product we make, fluff pulp. Fluff pulp can be used for a variety of products. What we sell our fluff pulp for is personal hygiene items such as diapers, hospital bed pads, other personal hygiene items that are highly absorbent. And when it goes out of our mill, as you can see, it looks like giant rolls of really thick paper. But it's fluff material that is goes through another process called a hammer mill, which a hammer mill, such as a Tendos in Greenville, is one. They unroll it, run it through a process that fluffs it back up again, and where they can, and it looks like cotton. You know, it looks like what you would expect it to look like to go in a diaper or other highly absorbent materials. And like I say, it's basically wood fiber that's been bleached and dried out. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's the basics of it. And people are very surprised to learn that it's primarily composed of wood fiber. We sell our products all over the world. We sell our products in Europe, in Asia, and other parts of the world. And our customers, both domestic and foreign, many of our customers require some type of certification label on what they're buying. And the gist of the certification is, in a nutshell, saying that we buy our material only from sustainable situations, that forest management is being shared with the landowners. The environmental concerns are in the forefront, as well as safety. The workforce is not using, illegal labor or doing, their harvesting in an illegal manner. Everything is done according to the law, and we also have the paperwork to back that up. And we are third-party audited every other year. We get a third-party audit, and in between that, we do internal audits within our own organization. So these are some of the labels that we sell our product under. PEFC is a little bit unique, and fortunately, that's what most of our European customers like, is PEFC, Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification. It also recognizes SFI and tree farm. So most of the certified wood that we buy is SFI certified, and we can sell it as PEFC to our European customers. Very little FSC is purchased here. Now I get to what I enjoy talking about. This is kind of basic here, but location map showing Plymouth, the Plymouth mill right here, and this is my farm right where you see 45. So the way the crow flies, I don't live far at all from the mill. Driving it's about 12 miles, but this is the heart of Eastern North Carolina, and like I say, it's pine growing land. This is the way my farm looked on the aerial in 1994. I acquired it in 1988. These darker areas are pine plantation, where I planted pine in the areas I felt like were most suitable to maximize my pine growth. The other forested areas are natural. I have a border of swamp here. And you see I have a certain amount of cropland. This field right here in the northwest corner, I converted into a shallow water waterfowl impoundment. So I host about 1,000 wild ducks each year, and I grow a crop in there and flood it in the fall for the ducks to enjoy when they migrate from the north down to the south of us on their typical yearly migration. So I really enjoy that. It's good recreation for the family, and just really pretty to see God's creation live out its beauty here on the farm. And one thing I want to emphasize is, you see, I have a diversity of uses here, and this was later in 2019. Um, when you maximize timber growth, for example, in these areas right here, I harvested it. These areas that I planted in pine, I actually harvested twice now, once in 1988 and again in 2015. So you can't tell it from this aerial, but there's little baby pine trees out there growing that are about 3 to 4 years old. Um, when you do this, you are not eliminating other goals. In other words, if you maximize for timber growth, that is also complementary to all the other benefits for the environment. Water quality, air quality, wildlife, the recreation, etc. There's benefits to young growth and old growth. I teach kids in school. Example I use is when you come home from school, and they love to talk about wildlife. They love pictures of wildlife and how it relates to that. I say, when you come home from school, you don't come home and just sit in one room in the house the rest of the evening. You have a room that you dine in, you have a room that you watch TV, a room that you hopefully do homework in, et cetera, et cetera. You have your kitchen. Well, wildlife's the same way. They love variety. They have areas where they bed down. They have areas of younger growth that has herbaceous new growth, and they have older stands where they get the mast, acorns, beech nuts, and that type thing. So the key is variety, and if you manage for that, you can really tap into the potential of the land, so to speak. I love my signs. I love my tree farm sign, the big four wood, water, recreation, and wildlife. Um, I've been a member of tree farm program for about 20 years now. Stewardship Forest, that was a program that kind of died out. That's something the Forest Service had back in the 90s. I kept the sign. I'm still listed in the program, but it's not really active at this time. Somebody asked me, do you have any wild turkeys on your farm? And my answer is, do you know of a farm in eastern North Carolina that does not have wild turkeys? Probably anywhere in North Carolina. But that's something that has really, really, proliferated in my area and really across the state and beyond. Seem to be more every year. And of course, you see my pine plantation in the background. This is some of my farmland that I rent out, and there's a lot of variety right here. And frost in the field, and I have some raccoons that are part of my tree farm family as well. I have a lot of persimmon trees that came up naturally around the edge of my duck impoundment. And Mr. Raccoon, he really loves the persimmon. And this was actually a mother that had three little ones. And the mother skedaddled across the fence and into the woods, and the three little ones remained for a little photo op there. And then I left them alone. If you got true wildlife diversity, you might see this. So you got the entire food chain there. And this is a timber rattler. This, very prevalent in East North Carolina. It used to be a lot more prevalent. They're endangered now, but this was another photo op I had was one that I always like to see, because that means the entire ecosystem is working well. Just a little little thing on the benefit of controlled burning. I love fire as a tool if you use it the right way. Just about every acre of the land that we love has been burned at some point in time. The Indians love fire as a tool as well, and it has a lot of benefits. For example, on site prep, you get some chemical release from fire. You guys, excuse me just a minute. You get some chemical release from fire, such as potassium and other nutrients that you don't otherwise have naturally. From that chemical reaction, you clear out the brush to get a good clean planting job, and it helps with the herbaceous material that comes back after. And also, I'm going to say that's from the same location after the fire. The areas I'll show you in a minute where the fire was the hottest, that's where I got the best growth because of the release of those type chemicals such as potassium, which pine trees love. And this is the progression here. That's one of my old labs, Stonewall, that's passed on at 2.5 years, and then 5 years. That's another one of my babies, Bedford. And you see, this is some of the best growth I had from that same location that I took the previous photo where the fire was the hottest. I have a special site, bald cypress tree, estimated to be somewhere in the 700 to 800 year old range. It's actually breast high, it's about 9.5 feet across. So I love taking people there to see that. And it is definitely a special site that will never be harvested in my life and beyond. My children have no desire to either. This is Leslie McCormick, who's head of the tree farm program from North Carolina, and my neighbor, Aubrey Asby. One of my favorite photos that kind of gives you the appreciation of the size of it. It kind of dwarfs all the other trees around it. Just talking about water quality, like I said, I've got a little pond behind the house. I got the buffer, of trees around it. And like I said, you get benefits from both old growth and new growth. Your new growth is actually more efficient with the root system and the vibrant growth of filtering out water for clean water. And young growth is also more efficient at oxidization, converting carbon dioxide to oxygen, which we all need. And of course, the old growth benefits, like I've talked about before, shelter, shade for cool water bodies, and also mass production for wildlife. These are just some notes I made kind of for myself. Y'all are going to hear a lot more about what Working Land Trust is all about from our speakers. I look at it as a landowner incentive. It was an incentive for me to keep my land in forest and ag production. And I have shared that value with my children, and I can tell you they see it as well. And they are glad that I did it as well, which really makes me feel good. This was just a sign I got. That's the same lab I showed in the previous picture, Old Bedford. And this was when I first received my sign, which I have proudly on display there on the farm now. And what it means to me as a landowner, and you landowners that are listening can apply it to yourself. If you don't have a management plan, I encourage you to get one. Either through the Forest Service or professional forester, a registered forester can do it. If you're already certified, you can share your certification status with other landowners, and talk to your tax advisor to get the special tax treatment for having it in the land use. Be knowledgeable about it. Knowledge is out there. All you got to do is Google things, and I know you can't believe everything you see online, but you can access just about everything you want to know about certification and the different certification bodies and things I've been talking about, and just continue to, practice good forest management. And like I said, my talk here centers around sustainability. My soapbox is, let's keep timbered acres in timber. If you don't get anything else from what I've been saying, get this: the enemy of sustainability is conversion to other uses. If we pave it, we've lost it. Okay. We live our lives on land that used to grow trees. We shop, we drive, we work, we play tennis, we play golf. We live our lives on acres that used to grow trees. So the acres we have that are growing trees, let's keep it that way if possible. Now, I believe in landowner rights. It's your prerogative as a landowner to do with your land what you wish. But I love the Working Land Trust program because it's just another way of giving landowners incentive, to keep it in production. So let's, finally, I'll say let's love and appreciate our God-given resource. And that is the conclusion of my presentation.
Awesome. Does anyone have questions in the chat for Mr. Chuck? Give it a minute. Well, in the meantime, I have a question for you, Chuck.
All right.
What has been the most rewarding aspect of your efforts to diversify the ecosystems around your farm in tandem with like growing timber?
Yeah, it's just the enjoyment of seeing it every day, and sharing it with my kids and my wife, and visitors. Just sharing that, and just thanking the good Lord every day for giving me the opportunity, really, to manage it. I mean, it's a dream come true, and something I always wanted to do that I knew I was meant to do was to manage this farm and keep it doing what it's doing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We appreciate you for it. Larry asks, is there a limit to acres of timber? I'm assuming that's in regards to the forest or tree farm program, which I think I don't have it off the top of my head. I will answer that in the chat unless you know it, Chuck.
I think it's 10 acres.
10 acres.
I think it's 10.
Got it.
And they know too.
Jared, I'll jump in too. So with the tree farm programs, 10 acres. And for looking, and we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but for easement purposes, if we're looking at strictly forested tracts, it would be 20 acres for our easement program. So, and then if I'm not mistaken, for forested acres for PUV would be 20 acres as well.
Yeah.
Great question, though.
Yeah, thank you for that. All right. Well, with that being said, I will kick it over to Dr. Megalos and he will take it away.
Hello, everybody. And thank you, Chuck, for raising the bar so that this rusty old guy can try to keep up. But I don't have as many pretty pictures and certainly do not have as compelling a story. But I did want to touch for a minute on some of the opportunities that exist for farm and forest. And I'll talk pretty quickly because I want to hear what Jared has to say. He's the new wildlife biologist, so credentialed, so he's going to keep us going. So a little bit about me. I'm a little older than Chuck, but I've known him many of these years. I've been a North Carolina public servant for most of the last 3 decades for sure. I promote land conservation. I try to practice some of the LLC practices with my family on a small property up where I was born. And I have been an original member of Working Land Trust. And somehow they convinced me to be their chair. But I couldn't think of a better way to support the wonderful staff that does this amazing work. And you'll hear from Mikey in a little bit, but for the past 13 years, we've been trying to get this thing up and running, and now it's running and at full speed, and there'll be some new programs to talk about. But why do we care about this stuff? It's about the land, like Chuck said. It's about feeding and clothing ourselves and housing ourselves in the future, but also all those creations that Chuck was so good about sharing. So what's at stake with farm income? We're looking at over $111 billion in the ag and ag industry portfolio. That's pretty recent numbers from last year. Not so recent numbers because we're a couple of years behind always in forestry to get the data. But another 42 billion is nothing to sneeze at. And we're talking about that whole supply chain of all the people from the producers on up to the sellers and supporters. And we heard Chuck talk about a healthy ecosystem. We want to maintain that in the future, and it starts with the land base. So that's what we're about. We're about helping people. And there's a lot of change going on. Some of the numbers for ag this year might not be as strong. On one of the farms that we lease, maybe half the acres were too late to plant this year, so they were fallow. A wrench in the works for wildlife. Some of those numbers are down, but certainly the money that's available in our rural areas. So some of the emerging markets or markets to tide you over begin with the natural resources and conserving them. So wildlife habitat, we'll hear more from Jared on that and a new program from Mikey. There's some other voluntary programs to sell carbon or to be compensated for growing trees. We've put the pencil to the paper for the last 2 decades, and a strong forest market can outstrip those carbon returns. So keeping a healthy market like Domtar, a paper company that's returning good jobs and wages, but also money back to our folks is crucial. And it's every part of the hog we need to take advantage of, the snoots and tails and everything but the squeal. So that's what keeps land productive and sustainable. There are many programs for cleaning up the water. Some have good compensation with them, and some come and go. Like I've been at this long enough where Falls Lake and Jordan Lake, many of the upper areas, landowners in the vicinity were paid for doing the right practices on the land. And then as Chuck mentioned, that military connection, last night I was sleeping in a warehouse getting ready to hunt in the morning, and we did have a flyover with 2 Chinooks. About 1 a.m, I got up to see what they were doing. But this is important, and a lot of our private landowners have benefited by having a conservation easement where the government and other Department of Defense entities have compensated them to keep their land doing what it's doing now, whether it's growing trees or cropland, as Charlie was good to tell us about. There's some governmental programs that might make sense, especially in these down cycles. Those could be CRP type or conservation reserve type programs, wetland reserve type programs. There was quite a bit of effort for water quality and wildlife habitat with the programs to plant trees, and lots of folks down east added to their portfolio by being paid to grow trees for a 30-year cycle. So, and some of those folks have extended that to longer periods and some permanent, with more money coming at each step as they took. But we're about finding ways to creatively sell off or detach your development rights hopefully to get compensation for that, but certainly tax benefits. And then the assurance that you're protecting the land forever for your legacy, for your family, but also future owners. And then just as I pay for access to use this farmland for consumptive purposes, there are more and growing folks who are interested in watching the birds and the waterfowl that Charlie is growing on his own farm. So it's not all about shooting. There's folks that want to just be able to access land and may pay you for that right to walk upon it or camp upon it. So I'm going to close here because I've just got a few more slides, but I encourage you to explore and learn about the market opportunities, the supply chain, the mills like Chuck was talking about. Those are high-end entities that are making a profit, and they need your wood to be successful. And maybe this is, Jared, a topic for another discussion, but we could get into some of the software that analyzes specific places throughout the Southeast. The Southern Group of State Foresters has promoted it, some of the landowner associations, the U.S. Forest Service, it's all based on their data. And then the Association of Forest Owners, some of the bigger industry groups have put this data out there so folks could know what the value of their woodlands are, but more importantly, where it ranks in terms of sustainability. So I put up the South Carolina map. We had some students and young professionals we were mentoring, and they did a market analysis of many of the counties for the Center for Air Properties. And this was after a few big mill closures there. And I'll never forget the executive director of that group said she had wished she had this data 10 years ago when they got started. So, but it was up to the date. And in the last year or two, they submitted that report. So we can get into that in greater detail, and you can start thinking about, just like Chuck has done on his property, what does he want to grow? What kind of legacy does he want to leave? What are the opportunities? And if there are individuals willing to pay for access to that, where are they coming from, and where is your land in proximity to where they'd be willing to drive, for instance. So setting up Jared for his talk, we just Working Lands Trust is a nonprofit group. I've been with them since the beginning. They'll have to kick me out, or I'll have to bow out for a term or two, but we're here to stay to support these folks on the great work that they're doing, and call upon any of us. After this slide was made, we've added 3 new staff people. So follow up with these folks and get in touch with me. I'm glad to walk you through some of those efforts. And Jared, I hope that's what you were looking for. And I'll give you back the screen.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. I'll give it a couple seconds to have any questions get typed in the chat, and then we can move on.
And I'll monitor the chart as you get to talking. I want to see the deer pictures. That's why I came.
Can't provide too many, but I do have a question for you. So,
Okay.
With so many years like watching the markets and everything and seeing the ebbs and flows, I know a lot of people are out there kind of concerned with where the markets are heading. What do you encourage small landowners to do in addition to traditional markets, different opportunities? You mentioned some of them, like
Right.
leasing out access and everything, but do you think the traditional markets are getting to a point where you almost have to rely on additional sources of income on your property, and that's something you must pursue as a landowner? Or
I think you want to keep all your options open. I think that I know I might have dropped a slide where we talked about mass timber and cross-laminated timbers. There are other uses we're finding that more wood, it can be even a better environmental solution. So we're seeing places like the Raleigh-Durham Airport using laminated beams to get an open structure in. And these are going to open up some markets for us, but yeah, I have lost that slide. We talked about biofuels. The aviation industry is not going to go to the wayside when fossil fuels are phased out. And so we're looking at trees as a good mechanism to pay for that. So some of it's the economics, a lot of it's the investment. There's some wonderful things being done with paper in the Midwest in terms of textured fabric and things that are made exclusively from wood. So our scientists are looking into a lot of that, everything from clear glass to even some of the electronic components in chips. They're looking at wood as a mechanism for doing that. So those times will come, but to answer your question forthright, be wise with your investment. Try to extend as much as you can with cost share and the like. Do good enough forestry as opposed to top of the line forestry. There are other options for investing your money, but the returns have still been good. And historically, the numbers that we prepared, halfway through my career are still valid today. I mean, our timber prices are relatively flat. Some of them have gone down in terms of the buying power, but we're also more productive on the acres that we are doing. So good enough forestry is still a wise investment. So I hope that got to your question.
It did. Thank you. Awesome. Well, I will take over from here. Get me pulled up here. Here we go. All right, so hey everyone, my name is Jared Lamb. I'm a conservation associate here at Working Lands Trust, like I mentioned earlier. My background is actually in wildlife biology. I graduated from NC State University with a bachelor's and recently with a master's degree in wildlife and conservation biology. And I'm here today to talk about the efforts to talk about efforts to maximize the recreational, ecological, and economic values in your working forest. Get this slide going. So we're most familiar with the economic values that working forests bring through, traditional and emerging markets that Mark had just talked about, which of course provide income from timber harvest through either commercial thinning and harvest of mature timber. However, the economic benefits of these working forests are a long play, as you often have to wait around 2 decades or more for trees to reach maturity from planting. And there's a lot of uncertainty about future market conditions and when it's time to harvest. And however, there are several more tangible and immediate values and benefits of owning a forest that landowners have the ability to tap into, which Mr. Chuck earlier eloquently described some of them, and I'll go into more detail about them here. One of those benefits is from recreation. These working forests often provide landowners with immense values of having land to do as they please on, whether that's hiking and taking walks through nature, hunting for both recreation and food acquisition, and all kinds of other things, such as, even from my experience as a kid growing up, working forests are a great place for kids to grow up in and just be able to be a kid. And so, not to mention that these are benefits that you can go and access tomorrow if you want to. In tandem with recreation, working forests also provide immense value ecologically to wildlife and the overall ecosystem. In North Carolina, wildlife persists primarily on private lands, and several wildlife species, such as the red-cockaded woodpecker, bobwhite quail, and even Bachman's sparrow, almost entirely depend on our privately owned working forest and landowner stewardship to maintain adequate environmental conditions. And in addition, game species such as white-tailed deer and wild turkey and migratory ducks greatly benefit from land stewardship, which focuses on increased habitat quality, which in turn improves the recreational potential of your property. and can also benefit your forest production. And on that note, one of the major points that I want to drive home for everyone today is that each of these values are related to one another, and direct improvements to one aspect can improve the other two with minimal compromise and a little bit of planning. And careful consideration of all three of these values in mind, landowners can really maximize the benefit of these things in their forest. And now with economic and recreational benefits, that can be pretty straightforward in terms of why should I do this? Economic improvements make you more money, while recreational improvements let you have more fun. But someone may ask, well, Jared, I don't really turkey hunt or think about the wildlife that much, so why should I care if turkey poults have enough understory cover to be able to eat enough bugs and hide from predators? And I'll kind of walk us through how habitat improvements are often extremely similar with management practices that you might already be considering while focusing on your timber productivity, and also adding awareness to the benefits that you're already providing to local wildlife and how that can add a lot of intrinsic value to your forest and provide you with a greater sense of responsibility and accomplishment, as you are all some of the most important stewards of land and natural resources in this country. And understanding what you're actually doing in full can make you feel a whole lot better at the end of the day, which is some of those values that Chuck had mentioned earlier as well. So the main perspective that I want to look through today is wildlife management, which is often overlooked, and then I'll relate these improvements back to economic and recreational benefits. And I'll discuss the different improvements through the framework of Aldo Leopold's 5 tools for wildlife management. For those who do not know who Aldo Leopold is, he's considered somewhat of a founding father of conservation and land stewardship and ethics, as well as wildlife management and just overall appreciation of the natural and working lands that we have in America. He was a professor, a forester, and an author, and his most well-known book was A Sand County Almanac, which I think everyone should probably read multiple times. But he coined these 5 tools in his book, Game Management. And I think this says that there are 5 tools for wildlife management, but you can also think of these as 5 tools for land management or even forest management as well. And they're not explicit for wildlife management. And of course, these 5 tools are the axe, the plow, the cow, fire, and then the gun. And I'll go through each one step by step and discuss how we can apply these tools to help achieve our objectives. So the first tool is probably the most obvious tool with working forest, and that is the axe. And it's worth mentioning that these aren't the literal tools, but more so the function of the axe, which of course can be achieved by chainsaws and other machinery. However, the purpose of the axe when it comes to wildlife management is to allow sunlight to reach the forest floor to promote growth of herbaceous plants that promote wildlife forage and cover. And this can be achieved by thinning a forest stand to an appropriate basal area, which varies depending on your focal wildlife species. But for general wildlife benefit, that basal area recommendation is generally around 60 to 90 for loblolly pine stands, and that can be even lower for longleaf pine stands. There are also other applications of the axe more literally, like using a hatchet to apply herbicide treatment that kills selected trees using the hack and squirt method that reduces mid-story hardwood competition and can open up the canopy even further. And so in relation to economic production, timber stand improvement by way of thinning is also a vital process to ensure the maximal growth of the trees and reduce competition. But typically, there can be a slight trade-off between opening the canopy and the density of the standing stock once the basal areas get too low, which of course that means less money when it comes to harvest. And however, the basal areas in that 60 to 90 range can produce better individual trees that bring in more money compared to a tree that grew in an overstocked stand. And when it comes to recreational values, thinning can create this park-like aesthetic, which can actually be enjoyable to walk through, and opens up the potential uses of the land rather than just growing trees. And however, when you do thin, it is an important consideration that when you open up the canopy, you need to establish an adequate burn regime, or you're going to create a really nasty thicket by fast-growing hardwoods in a few years, and you really can't walk through that stuff and have a good time at the same time. So The next tool is the plow, and also disking or just overall soil disturbance, which of course can't really be used effectively in standing timber, but many landowners both have forest and row crop agricultural production simultaneously, where timber stands produce income on the lower quality soils and you can farm the higher quality soils. Chuck's farm earlier was a perfect example of that agroforestry mix, where you had plenty of edge, plenty of diversity that is really good for wildlife, like you mentioned. And another wildlife improvement, if you have bordering crop fields to timber stands, is edge feathering. That's where you allow the border vegetation in that crop field to grow up rather than just planting crops. And you would mow it in staggered time frames that creates a mosaic and a diverse understory and midstory layers right at that forest edge. This does occupy some of those productive soils in the farm. However, those trees often shade out these edges of the fields where you often have a lot of crop loss, and you can save that money by just edge feathering and promote wildlife diversity. The plow can be used to establish food plots within timber stands that can concentrate whitetail deer movement and create easier hunting with higher visibility, which improves the overall recreational value of your property. In addition, if you really wanted to get into it, plows can help convert fallowed and old fields and other areas into native meadows, grasslands, which are really threatened nowadays. And because this is that soil disturbance can really revitalize the seed bank and help establish that native flora that's already in the soil. We also have the cow, which of course isn't what you typically think of when managing for a forest or wildlife. And Leopold initially included the cow more so for rangeland management in the West and Midwest. However, this doesn't mean that we can't apply this in timber stands in the East. And a popular, really emerging practice is silvopasturing, where you can manage grazers such as cows, goats, sheep, etc to graze in your timber stand, which allows for fertilization of the soils as well as increased cover for the livestock that can reduce stress during those hot months. This practice does require a low basal area, though, because you need that sunlight to hit the forest floor to promote growth for the livestock. However, silvopasturing it also requires really careful management of each resource, but done so right, it can create a very productive piece of land with diverse sources of income, as well as diverse landscape compositions if done so on a rotational basis. And of course, as we learned earlier from Chuck, diversity on the landscape means better wildlife habitat for everything, pretty much. And so, likely more familiar to everyone here, and Chuck talked about this earlier, is the tool of prescribed fire. Fire, of course, is critical in working forest as it reduces the wildfire risk by limiting fuel loads in the understory. But ecologically speaking, fire is a critical component of regeneration for many native plant species, including longleaf pine and wiregrass. However, it also provides additional nutrients to the soil, which boosts the growth of highly nutritious herbaceous plants that can provide food and cover for all kinds of wildlife species and improve ecosystem health. And again, thinning timber stands and burning are typically applied in tandem as you promote understory growth by thinning and limit that excess growth by burning on a strict regime, which can also promote more growth and healthier growth over time. Burning can also create this park-like forest in some areas, which is just, nice to walk through. It can help restore native ecosystems like the longleaf pine savanna, which you can see here on the right. And these ecosystem types have been increasingly rare as time has gone on. And it's important to have different burn blocks when applying prescribed fire on larger properties where different regimes and frequency can promote that diverse successional stage of vegetation, which of course again improves that wildlife habitat and diversity. And ultimately, this can really increase the hunting potential of a property as well, as a lot of game species really love frequently burned areas and often are attracted to it. And speaking of hunting, our final tool is the gun. And by gun, Leopold meant hunting, which of course is a critical component of wildlife management, as well as ecosystem management. As when you think about it, oftentimes deer can become overabundant in a lot of areas, and hunting helps limit the foraging pressure that can negatively impact understory growth. And if we really wanted to get into the weeds, if you're really into deer hunting, reducing deer densities can create great conditions to grow big bucks and put more food in their stomachs, which of course, can grow bigger antlers. Hunting can also provide immense recreational value, and of course, it's probably the primary source of recreation in working forest. And steps to improve wildlife habitat, specifically for deer and wild turkey, can greatly improve the hunting conditions and quality. And even if you don't hunt, hunting can provide additional options for income in your forest, as hunting leases can be an option. And of course, if you manage for pristine hunting conditions and you have big deer or a lot of turkeys on your property, hunters can be more willing to pay for the ability to hunt on your property and gain you extra income. So, of course, a lot of these management actions require cost, and even though it takes money to grow trees, unfortunately, money doesn't grow on them. But there are several cost share programs and funds that can help landowners alleviate these costs to achieve their objectives. There is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, known as EQIP, Conservation Stewardship Program, which is CSP, Forest Development Program, which is the FDP. There's also a prescribed burning cost share program in North Carolina. And even for longleaf pine plantings and other plantings of threatened plant species, there's additional grants like ones through the Longleaf Alliance to plant longleaf pine seedlings in new areas. Additionally, there's opportunity for landowners to receive compensation for putting their property in a conservation easement and give up their development rights, which Mark had mentioned earlier, and Mikey will get into more detail later. But these are through state and federal application processes, and you can use these funds to help achieve your objectives on your property and help meet your objectives. And with that being said, there's a lot of things to consider when you're trying to apply these practices on your property. And I went over a wide array of topics today that may or may not have applied to your property, and how you implement these practices are really dependent on your own goals as a landowner, as it's really not a one size fits all shoe. But because of this, here at Working Lands Trust, we are in the early beginnings of starting up a program called the Land Enhancements for Agriculture and Forestry, where on top of our established mission to protect working farms and forests of North Carolina through conservation easements, we want to work with landowners like y'all to provide technical assistance to complete management activities and enroll in some of the cost share programs that I mentioned earlier, as well as help establish habitat management plans that can work in tandem with forest management plans. That way we can help you realize the maximum potential of your property. Like I mentioned, program is very early in development, so we'd really like to hear from you about what services you would like to see us provide as an organization that can help you establish and realize your goals for your working forest. On top of that, we'd love to hear from you about future topics we would like to see discussed, you would like to see discussed, as we're hopeful this can really become a full webinar series over time. And we want to make sure we tackle topics that y'all would like to hear about. We'll be sending out a post-webinar survey to the email that you registered for this meeting with, and we really hope to hear from you. And with that being said, I'll take any questions if there are some, and then I will pass it on to Mikey. I can't see the chat. Awesome.
All right. Are you heading over the torch?
Yes. You're good to go.
All right. Let me see if I can get mine to share. How's that? Can we see it?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Perfect. Well, first of all, thank y'all so much for dropping in and attending this first part of the webinar series. I know it's close to the holidays, and we all got lots of stuff going on, but it means a lot to us here at Working Lands Trust that you were able to jump on and learn a little bit more about potentially what your working forest can do for you. A little bit following up such good speakers always makes me a little nervous, but a little bit about me. So my name is Mikey Fulk. My real name's Michael, but everybody calls me Mikey. So all my friends, so all of y'all, please feel free to call me Mikey. But I was born and raised in North Carolina, but down in Robeson County, so down in that southeast corner. I have been my training, my schooling was as a wildlife biologist. I also attended NC State, but much to my mama's uh, not make her very happy. And as soon as I graduated, I moved out to Montana. So I lived out there for about 13 years and worked with the state fish and game out there and did a lot of work helping landowners, protecting their properties, but also with their hunting programs. And um, so, yeah, it was really great. But I'm a North Carolina girl through and through. So it was time to come back. I've been with several other land trusts, both in the state and nationally, but in 2023, I found my home with Working Lands Trust. We are the only land trust in North Carolina. We're statewide that focus solely on our food and fiber industry, protecting our farms and forests. So, a little bit about me. What I'm going to talk about tonight, which some of the earlier speakers touched on a few things, so it'll probably go a little bit quicker than I originally thought. But just what can we do to protect our working forests? So, North Carolina Forest at a glance, and this came from the NC State Extension publication in 2022. So it's a little bit old, but we have over 18 million acres of forest land. Let me scoot because I can't see all my stuff. Those acres are unreserved forest land is classified as timberland. It's capable of producing 20 cubic feet or more of commercial timber. But one thing I really want you to understand, of those 18 million acres, 85% is privately owned. So you as a landowner hold the key to our working forest legacy. So most of all of our forests here in North Carolina are privately owned. Let's see. There we go. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit too about a lot of times with our forest land, we also have, like Chuck has on his farm, we have agriculture as well. And this is just a statistic that we really want to keep hammering home because we're losing so much of these natural areas and these working lands. The American Farmland Trust ranked North Carolina second in the nation in losing agricultural land. The estimated loss by the year 2040, in which if it continues on the path that it was going, we're expected to lose 1.1 million acres of ag, and that includes timber as well. But if the development increases, we could lose as much as 1.6. The latest projections is putting us on more on the 1.6 side. So with that being said, we're only second behind Texas in the nation for losing this. And what's so disturbing about that, not only are we losing that land, but if you think about it, what's North Carolina's number one industry, right? It's agriculture. Forestry not far behind. Our military is second. And so all the things that North Carolina, our economic values are perched on is determined by whether, we have this land in the future. So some of you may know, but some of you may not. What is a land trust? There's quite a few land trusts across the state. A land trust is a nonprofit organization that works to conserve land by either acquiring it or putting conservation easements on it, and then stewarding and managing lands for conservation easements. Well, there we go. So Working Lands Trust, you saw this on Mark's slide earlier too, is Working Lands Trust is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the conservation of North Carolina's farms and forests. We also, we're very, very blessed to have a great working relationship with our military too, to be able to help protect lands in those areas that they consider priority and for military readiness. So we're very, very blessed with that partnership as well. We'll talk about that in a little bit. As Mark's slide already showed you, but we were founded in 2013. But the reason Working Lands Trust was founded is, there's a lot of ways to do conservation easements. There's a lot of ways to do conservation. Most of the traditional ways, when folks look at it and think about conservation easements, it's, let's protect these blueways and these river systems and all this natural habitat for a certain species. And while all that's great, there was nobody looking out for the farmer and the forester. Those folks who steward the land, who provide not only ecological value, but also economic value for the masses. So with that, with the increase in interest among farm and forest landowners, the North Carolina Forestry Association, the North Carolina State Department of Agriculture, and community leaders got together and formed what we now know as Working Lands Trust. So just sort of by the numbers, what have we been doing? We are very, very lucky to have such a great team. We actually have been growing over the recent years, which is great. Jared's one of our just wonderful conservation associates. Miss Lisa Sheely's on here as well. She's our associate director. And we're just about to close another easement here within this week. But to date, over 40 properties conserved, and we're gonna go over that 20,000 acres of farms and forests protected by the end of the week. We do have over 46 active and proposed projects, total over 6,000 acres, and over 30,000 acres of potential projects with landowners who wish to see their properties conserved. And so if you see this, the sort of the orange dots, those are proposed or potential projects. The green are some of the projects that we've already closed. You see a lot of our work has been in eastern North Carolina. We're definitely looking over into western North Carolina as well. But we have, as I said earlier, our military partners have been a blessing for us, that we've been able to work with them. And, in reality, I'm thinking about big forest, big land, agriculture, eastern North Carolina has that in abundance. So what are some different issues facing North Carolina forestry? So conversion of working forests, that represents a major threat to the continued abundance of North Carolina's natural resources and economic resilience. Like I said, one of our top economic drivers is forestry in North Carolina. So with direct, indirect, and induced effects, the forest sector in North Carolina had a total contribution of $32.8 billion in output to the North Carolina economy in 2023. You can see that's not only just funds and money going into the system, but also full-time and part-time jobs, and with a payroll of about 8.3 million. So not only is it helping sustain others, but it's sustaining folks within that industry. Of course, like Jared alluded to earlier, not only is our working force a state economic driver, but there's so many values that we can't even begin to measure that come along with working forest, which, like I said, Jared talked a little bit about that earlier. But what the other thing that I really want to push home is, of course, the private landowner, right? The economics of land loss is not only shouldered by the private landowner, but also by the consumer of those forestry products and resources. So not only are we seeing the loss from the private landowner, when we lose those working lands, but also those resources that are shared by the masses. So talking a little bit, we're gonna change gears. Mr. Chuck talked about, different things to help incentivize and how to sort of market and expand the things that you can do with your working forest or your farm or forest. Same thing with Dr. Megalos and Jared. What I really want to talk a little bit about is agricultural easements. And so when we say agricultural easements, that also means forestry. So They are a tool to help farmers and foresters resist development pressures. I can say for myself, which I'm sure a lot of you here on the call, I get letters all the time. We ain't got but a little 10 acres. Well, let me buy you land. Let me buy you land. Let me buy you land. I need to develop it. I need to develop it. And so that's not going to go away. That's going to continue. So a lot of times our landowners say, well, what options do I have? I mean, I'm either going to sell it or, what can I do to produce more income to make it at least comparable to what, these developers are looking for. So easements, that's one way. Agriculture easements tend to decrease property values, thereby keeping land reasonably priced. Oh, I don't know what that did, but that's okay. For both new and existing farmers or foresters, one of the big things that we hear, especially from first-time foresters or first-time farmers, land ain't cheap, and it's not. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But when there's an agricultural easement on a piece of property, theoretically, that brings the value of the property down because you have sold the developmental rights. But that also, in turn, makes it more affordable. Say, like one day, the neighbor kid down on the next farm, he really wants to continue that legacy, and you end up able to sell it to him. Not only have you already recouped developmental costs for your property, but he's able to purchase it at a decent price. Also, they can provide substantial financial compensation. We'll talk a little bit more about that. With easements, there's a couple of ways to do easements. They can be purchased easements, which we typically look at with landowners. That means we want to pay you for those developmental rights. If you're giving them up, we want to see what we can do to either pay you for them, or you could potentially take the tax benefits from that. Anytime you donate an easement or put your land in a conservation easement, there are great tax benefits that come along with it. And I think North Carolina just restarted their conservation tax incentive. So we'll have to do a little bit of digging, but it just came through, I think. So again, numerous tax benefits, property, income, estate, and then also if we can do a purchased easement, potentially bring in money to the closing table to be able to provide that for the landowner. It's a nice middle ground of limited development, agriculture, forestry, land conservation, and financial compensation. So instead of just selling to, say, a developer or just selling outright, it's a great way to do an encompassing conservation almost plan. So if you're looking at an easement, there's other cost share programs. You can really bring together a suite of things to be able to make your working lands work for you. And they're also a good estate planning tool that helps a landowner plan for the future. A lot of times I hear from landowners, I don't know what I'm gonna do once I leave this world, which we all will. When they have property, what's gonna happen to it? Is it going to have a Dollar General in the next 50 years? This is a good way, conservation easement, agricultural easement, it's a good way. If you want to continue that forest and farming legacy, this is a good way to do it. Because once that easement's on there, I don't care if it's 50 or 100 years from now, it'll still be a farm or forest. And I think for a lot of our landowners, that's important to them, is making sure that family farm, that family forest, all the time and effort and sweat and blood and tears that they put into it will continue on long after they're gone. So we talked about this a little bit. I wanted to just reiterate the conservation needs to provide landowners with access to financial and technical resources. Of course, the conservation funding, that was the purchased easement. The tax benefits, so if the private landowner donates the easement, there are certain tax advantages that can come along with that, but also stewardship too. So assistance and ongoing assistance available to easement landowners. With that being said, Jared talked about the program that we're launching in 2026. This is just another way for us to be able to help you reach your conservation goals. When we put, if we're able to put a conservation easement on your property, I always say it's like a marriage that ain't going nowhere. You know, we will always be there for you, to help, you know, help you reach your conservation goals and stewardship. We have to, every year, we have to go back out and make sure everything looks the way it was when we put the conservation easement on it. And so it's definitely a partnership that is forged when we do a conservation easement. Well, my thing just doesn't want to turn. So a little bit more sort of easement details. They say the devil's in the details. An easement is a primary tool utilized by a land trust to conserve land. So this is our main bread and butter. This is the main objective that we have to reach our mission, is to work with landowners to make sure their land is conserved in perpetuity. It is, like I said, a perpetual agreement. Perpetual is forever and ever, between a landowner and land trust. And what we are looking to limit is just the developmental spots. Now, I have a lot of landowners say, "Well, Mikey, what if my youngin needs a house? You know, what if I need to put up another shed to do some, you know, cut some timber, or, you know, put a greenhouse, or, you know, things like that." That's okay. Those are things that we can work into that easement. There are some restrictions. We only go so far, but when it comes to an agricultural easement, it's probably one of the most broad and lenient easements there are. The main objective is to protect our food and fiber, our farms and forests and working forests. And so there's a lot of things that we can do to accommodate, you know, just your family's needs or your needs moving forward. A landowner retains all rights and all ownership. So a lot of times, well, I don't want to sell my land. Well, we're not buying the land. What we are paying you for, or what you're donating, is just the opportunity to develop it. So basically, I'm not trying to pick on Dollar General by no means. There's just a lot of them, you know, that 20 years from now, we're not going to see one in the middle of your hayfield. Or, you know, 30 years from now, there's not going to be an apartment complex where a big stand of timber used to be. Those are the types of things that we're talking about that it limits. But the land's still yours. You still sell it. You still pass it to your youngins. Anything that goes along, you still do all your farming and forestry practices. So you retain all those rights and ownership. An eligible property must contain one or more conservation values. And so in North Carolina, and we're looking at conservation easements, the two that we're mainly looking at is farming and timber management. Those are the two we concentrate on, but there's other things that other landowners may value a little bit more and want to protect: recreational uses, habitat management, education and research. So there's a lot of things that you can base the easement on. For us and what we do, it's strictly farming and timber management. So here's where we got to talk about our funding partners. So when we work to do an easement on your property, we're looking to do a purchased easement. If that's what the route we're going, we need to find the funding to be able to protect it. We're very, very lucky in North Carolina that the agriculture NCDA, our North Carolina Department of Agriculture, has a program called the agricultural well, I can't get my thing over. Sorry about that. I'm trying to get this to scoot over a little bit. Agricultural Development and Farmland Preservation Trust Fund. What that program does is it provides a certain amount of funds to help protect these lands in perpetuity, protect this farmland, protect these forests in perpetuity. It has, over the recent years, gotten very popular, but that's our main funding source. The NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, they also have programs for conservation easements. Again, our U.S. Department of Defense, very blessed to work with them. We work with the Navy, the Air Force, MCI East. They have funds set aside to be able to sort of match and look at those areas that are in their priorities to see what they can do to help us protect those as well. So what's the process? It is a process, and I tell, it's not a quick let's get it done process, unfortunately, but nothing good ever is. So there are an easement application that we have to put in. They're agency specific, what's called an option to purchase an easement. We have to do appraisals and site evaluations, landowner acknowledgments, and the authorization to proceed. And of course, we have to have, that match requirement. A lot of times for easements, I like to say it's almost like playing Tetris, right? So you have to find the perfect match to be able to get the full economic value for the landowner. And so we do what we can to get full value of that easement. There's also due diligence items that we have to do, ESA, environmental site assessments, surveys, appraisals, conservation plans, forest management plan, all the legal due diligence. And one of the big things, I think one of the biggest questions I have from landowners, well, Mikey, this all sounds great, but what's it going to cost me? And rightfully so. Most of the time, when we apply for these funds to do conservation easements, we are able to put in the cost of these due diligence items. So the survey, the ESA, the BDR, which is the baseline documentation report, we can get all of those services paid for you if we're able to secure a contract to do an easement like this. Usually the only one that's not covered is the appraisal, but we thanks to our wonderful partners over at North Carolina Grange, they have a program that's set up to be able to provide grants to their members. Pay $25, you become a member, NC Grange, and you can potentially get a $3,000 grant to help you work through your conservation easement due diligence items. And if that's not a good return on investment, I don't know what is. Stewardship, I talked a little bit about having our marriage, right? It's our marriage. We have to go out there every year. So we do monitoring of the property to make sure everything's still the way it needs. Those easement values are still present. Site visits, you may have folks coming from Department of Agriculture, coming from our military partners, because they have put in money, they have invested into this easement, so they would come out for some site visits as well. And this is just a time for us to come and sit down, have a cup of coffee. What can we do to help you? What do you have any concerns? What are some other goals that you want to reach on your property? And so timeline. Usually, the applications for ADFP, which is our Department of Agriculture, around October through December. NRCS, I put January, but a lot of times that's a little iffy. But we're looking at January, I think, this year for putting in applications. Approval from Department of Agriculture, you're looking around following July and August. NRCS following October. And then the duration, we usually say it takes a minimum of 2 years if we're doing Department of Agriculture. So from the moment they give you that contract or we get that contract, it starts to clock for around 2 years. If we have NRCS funding, that could be up to 5 years. But it is a process, but it's definitely worth it at the end. So how can you help support North Carolina's forest legacy by becoming a donor? We are, like I said, we are a 501c3. We all the funds that we get go directly back into making sure that our mission and we're able to do things for our landowners. And so we would love for you to become a donor or a member. Consider placing your farm or forest in a working lands easement. You've got myself here, Jared. We'll have our contact information. If that's something that you want to pursue, by all means, we can definitely visit with you. And then just tell a friend and spread the word. Word of mouth is some of the best PR we can have. And we're very thankful for Mr. Chuck. Not only is he an incredible person, forester, new granddaddy, but he's also one of our closest landowners. We love him, and he's done really good by us and been able to talk to neighbors and other folks too. So word of mouth is always a good thing. So, but after that, I'll just leave it open to questions. I didn't go over hopefully I didn't go over my allotted time, but I will open it up and hand it back over to you, Jared.
Awesome. I will see if there are any questions come in, but you did such a good job explaining everything. I don't know if there will be. Um, Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for coming. That concludes our webinar session. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out a post-webinar survey just for you to fill in any comments that you might have, what you'd like to hear, services you'd like provided in the coming years, and we can try and address them and have a webinar on them later. Also, we will post this to our YouTube channel and we'll send the link to the email with the webinar that you registered for the webinar as well. That way, if you heard something that you might didn't catch or want to come back to this in the future, you can go to that YouTube video and listen to us talk about it again.
And
And you
I'll
can
say,
share this with people who might not have been able to make it today as well, that you might think would be interested. Go ahead, Mikey.
yeah, I didn't mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We will too make sure that all of our contact information is also sent over within that email. So, and by all means, right now, if anybody has any questions you want to just ask, we can unmute you or you can put it in the chat or however you want to do it, or raise your hand and we can definitely, let you, we can address the questions that you have, but we do want to make sure all that contact information is there for you too. So Jared will include that.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in and taking time out of your weeknight to listen to us talk. And we hope you got some information out of it that'll help you in the future. Yeah, thanks again.
Awesome. Thank y'all.